Good day to everyone. Welcome to this special football edition as we recap the league so far in the Sknfa Premier League. Well, as you would all know, the league has been sort of suspended for now due to the COVID-19 situation in St. Kitts and Nevis. At a time when the league, that decision was made, the league was almost halfway into round 2 of the competition. So we did go far away, but had to come to a halt pending the COVID-19 situation, and hopefully we can resume in short order. So what we're going to do in today's show is that we're going to use the opportunity to pick the brains of some of the persons who have been covering the games so far in the Sknfa Premier League, the 2022-2021 season, and to get their insights into how the individual teams have performed. I have with me none other but LaShawn Dixon of the St. Kitts Nevis Observer and a regular commentator and analyst on the program, on the football coverage, and of course Mr. Sylvester Charles, one of the commentators of the Premier League live broadcast. Gentlemen, welcome, good evening, and so glad you could join me today.
Yes, thanks.
Good evening. Good
for
evening.
having us back.
Yeah. Well, we have to keep football alive. While we wait for things to get back to normal, we have to sort of keep the fans, give something to the fans. And so this is one of the ways in which we do that. So before we get into the individual teams, I want to get each of your thoughts on how you thought the league has been going so far, generally. Not so much any specific team, but how you found the league going until, of course, we came to the halt. LaShawn, we'll start with you.
Well, as you know, when the season started earlier this year, we had the unfortunate news that fans won't be allowed in the stadium initially, at least, and that was something that did an adjustment not only for the players but for even us working on the coverage of the games. It took an adjustment, but in the end, I think overall they were able to create an atmosphere using club executives and those who were able to attend these games to at least create something for players, and eventually the players grew into the season. Up until it was halted, was really heating up. We had a few good games. We saw a battle brewing in the relegation zone. We saw a battle brewing for top six. So it's quite unfortunate the season had to be halted when it was beginning to heat up, when positions were consequences rather were on the line, are starting to become on the line.
Indeed, it was really getting exciting towards the wire at that point. We'll talk more about that later on. Mr. Charles, what about you?
Well, I want to agree with LaShawn that the virtual setup without the fans created some anxiety for both the players, as well as the officials. But I think things actually smooth out getting into the actual tournament. The first half was very exciting. I mean, the first round was very exciting. I saw some good performances from the better teams. Some teams really were shining. Some players came into their own. We saw the youngsters from the Old Road Jets. They were looking quite promising. The team from Nevis Bath, they put out a good performance showing in the first half. They sort of was getting their feet wet. What we expected from the more seasoned team like Spurs and so on, we got that from those teams. I think there were some teams with a little trouble in between a team like Connery and so on, that they came out of it nicely going into the second round. And so football generally was picking up. I was sort of satisfied with the performances I had seen, and the depth that we've seen coming out of the team. So the more the teams had the opportunity to play, the better they were getting at that point in time when things had to shut down.
Well, one of the teams that didn't seem to skip a beat whatsoever at the start of the season was the defending champions, SL Horses St. Paul's. They came out firing, all guns blazing. They played some really exciting football. They only lost one match. Interestingly enough, to St. Peter's, and that was an interesting game because the game winner was scored by one of their former players, Aidan Nurse, who played with them last season, won the title with them, but originally from St. Peter's and went back home to play with his home side. But gentlemen, St. Paul's have been phenomenal, and we have not seen a team apart from St. Peter's, that have been able to slow them down to the point where we think that any team would top them this season? Mr. Charles, your thoughts on St. Paul's? You commentated on some of their games, and you've seen how well they've been playing.
Well, congratulations to St. Paul's. They have really been playing well, tremendous football from the start of the league. They have maintained a very high standard. They were fortunate against Viceroy Nelson from Keon. That's another very exciting player who had transferred, strengthening the offense of the St. Paul's team. And then you had Keith Roy Freeman. You can't say much about Keith Roy Freeman. He's almost unstoppable on the field of play. And with players like those from St. Paul's, and the attitude generally from the players out of St. Paul's, it's like really true defending champions. I think they deserve the position that they're in. They are well supported by their fans and by management. And you could see when they come out to play, they have the attitude of winners. They're champions. And so they exhibit that onto the field of play. So I think they're going to be a very difficult team to beat. You might slip in a win here or there, maybe a draw here and there, but really across the thing, they're going to be difficult really to beat in the end.
Yeah. What about you,
I
Rashad?
hope that some team can stop them.
Well, we're waiting to see. St. Peter's did get a victory against them. By the way, and I must put this caveat, and it's not an asterisk against the victory, but the time when St. Peter's defeated them, they were without Vince Roy Nelson and Keith Roy Freeman, who were both away on international duty, and they were back in quarantine, so they weren't able to play in that particular game. And so it was a big victory for St. Peter's at that point. But LaShawn, what are your thoughts on St. Paul's?
Yeah, one word I would use to describe the way they have played this season would be professional. They have good defensive stability over the years. We've known them being a strong defensive team. So far this season, they've only conceded 4 goals across 4 chests, which is quite impressive. And adding Vince who was second in the Golden Boot race last year to Keith Roy Freeman, adding those two together, it brings another element to them in attack. And we've seen it. They're the leading goal scorers with 34 goals. So they did 34 across 14 games. And as you said, the one blemish the record this season was the game to St. Peter's, and a game where they played particularly well most in the first half, but performance in the second half definitely it deserved more than what they eventually got. But credit must be also given to St. Peter's to finding the gall and the guts needed to come out of that game with a big 3 points.
So if there's a team that looks like they could put up a challenge against St. Paul's, it might be St. Peter's, Mr. Charles. They defeated them, and they scraped over with a point.
With a point, they scraped away with a point. You call it a scrape? Probably St. Paul's was fortunate that they were defeated again by St. Peter's. I think St. Peter's might be feeling as though psychologically they have the number of St. Paul's and they can defeat them at will. And so St. Paul's might actually be the lucky team when they are coming up against St. Peter's. But St. Peter's is a team to contend with. They have some good players. You have Stephen, the guy who runs down on the left. I can't quite remember his name now. Adonis. He's one of the star players. Yeah. Yes, once he gets going and he's on cue for that day, he's going to be a handful for any team. And so with Nurse back at home, I like the fact that players are going back home. When you go back home to support your community and your community team, that is where it really tells your heart is in it. And it's going to be difficult for St. Paul's to really take out St. Peter's in my estimation. On any given day, St. Peter's can have a good game against St. Paul's. Psychologically, maybe St. Paul's has already been defeated by St. Peter's.
I beg to differ on that one, because while St. Peter's did play a very good game in that match and could have won it, Kitty had a golden opportunity. And we know Kitty on his day doesn't miss those goals like that. He had a golden opportunity to put that game to bed. St. Paul's was actually piling the pressure on in the second half. You know, the first half, St. Peter's dominated. Second half, St. Paul's came out with the intention to win that game, but somehow just didn't do it. But I guess you're right. I guess St. Peter's will go away with confidence, knowing that they can take on the defending champions and put them to the sword. So we'll see what happens
That's right.
when the playoffs begin. So that is the team that's in number 1 position. That's St. Paul's. This is also St. Paul's, the defending champions. But right behind them is and now this is the interesting thing about the table. Now, 14 games more or less would have been played for most of the teams. The team that is closest to St. Paul's, Hobson Enterprises, Garden Hotspurs, are in second place, but they are basically almost 10 points behind St. Paul's. They have 29 points.
12 points.
Well, 12 points, yes. 12 points behind. So that's a huge gap, and we're, like we said, we're almost halfway in the second round. So it's a big gap, very hard one for anyone to catch. But Spurs, you think it's a commendable event? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Charles. I know you're a Spurs fan, so I'm going to start with you. What do you think about Spurs' performance? I mean, the fact that of all the teams that could come close to St. Paul's after this part in the season, it's Spurs.
Well, Spurs is one of the better teams in the tournament. The brand of football that you see from Spurs, you don't really find it in none of the other team. I think the performance was going pretty, satisfactory in the first round. They were holding their own. They had all of the players. They had Rowan Wigley back. He made a difference in the defensive midfield. You had like Steve Archibald and Giovanni Lake. But I think somewhere along the line, it started falling off a bit. Dika was trying a few things. He was using some of the bench players in some of the game, resting some of his son, and so they had a very good showing. They had a very good patches of play, a period of play where they were looking very invincible. I don't think St. Paul's was very far away from them, but after a while they got into some trouble. Some of their players, red card to Giovanni Lake. Steve Archibald, I think he got injured. He was out. Rowan Wigley, he had to step out. He also got injured. And so the whole structure and everything changed up for the Garden Hotspurs. But Garden Hotspurs look as though it's a team that in second place could be very dangerous in the playoffs. They may not catch up in the regular league, but in the playoffs, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat. Once they have all of their players back and they put in the same style of performance that we saw in the first round, it's going to be very difficult for any team to defeat them. Plus, they have the brothers back. They have Hanley brothers. When they're playing with Garden Hotspurs, I am telling you, that's a brand of football that looks international and quite professional. But they just have to be more consistent.
Yes,
be more consistent.
That is
very important.
That is the biggest problem for Spurs. And if you couldn't find it any better than the FA Cup quarterfinals that they played against Village, they had Village on the ropes. They were supposed to have won that game. Yes. Village took the early goal. They managed to get back and equalize a few moments later. And all they had to do was just, get the ball in the back of the net in penalty kicks. And they just booted 2 shots over the bar. So it just shows you the inconsistency, as you point out, of Spurs. But you raised a very interesting point, Mr. Charles, which I want to get LaShawn to chime in on. And that is Giovanni Lake. A very talented player, one that when he's in, he's like the engine on the midfield and really the engine of the attack for Spurs. But as you pointed out, he picked up 2 red cards basically back to back. He came off a suspension in a game, and the very next game he played, he picked up a red card for a bad tackle. How much of a problem is that for Spurs to have a player like Giovanni Lake, a very important player like Giovanni, but always seems to be getting into foul trouble?
Well, if I don't think... when you have...
Okay.
Yeah, you go LaShawn and then we'll come to you.
Go ahead, LaShawn. Yes.
Well, when you have a key player, Giovanni Lake, who is a 3 currently, if memory serves me right, in the Golden Boot race for this season. When you have they always want to keep on the field for as long as possible, and the only time you wouldn't want them and if it's through voluntary means, meaning coaching decision.
Yeah, Mr. Charles, you wanted to chime in on the Giovanni Lake
Yes, with
saga.
Giovanni League. Very surprised, because I realize a number of our players, they are very skillful. Okay, they know to pass the ball, kick the ball, chop the ball, move it around. But when it comes to the mental and the psyche, that is where I think a lot of the teams suffer. I mean, one of the red cards that Giovanni got was highly ridiculous. I mean, he just tracked down the player from behind from about some 20 meters outside and tackled him from behind. I mean, ridiculous. The mental strength. I mean, so our coaches now have to go a little further and get persons who can speak to the psyche, the psychological development as well as the mental strength of the players. They need to be taught that. They have to do more thinking, not just kicking the ball around. That is very easy. But they got to think football and know when to make certain decisions on the field of play. And that way, I think that his team suffered after he was taken out. By injury, had Rovan Wigley and Steve Archibald been taken out, and so the teams had as a result of that. And so they must recognize their importance on the field, and make sure that they're there at least every game, especially for the very important. Don't give up foolish red cards like that.
Indeed, indeed. Well, what we're going to do, gentlemen, we'll take a break here, our first break. We'll come back and we'll talk some more of the other teams. We have to go through the entire 12 teams, so we have quite a long time here with us. We just did two, which is Garden Hotspurs and St. Paul's FC, the two top teams in the Premier League. We'll be right back after these messages.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
It's the new and improved SKN Newsline Android mobile app. With the SKN Newsline app, you can watch your news reports, the SKN Newsline newscast, sports, special features, and so much more. You can also send us a WhatsApp or call us directly. Go in the Google Play Store, search SKN Newsline, and download the app today. The SKN Newsline mobile app. News on the go.
Welcome back to our coverage here of the Sknfa Premier League, a review of the first round and the second round so far, just as the league came to a halt due to the COVID-19 situation in the country. I'm Andre Hugh, your host. This is a special Football Weekly broadcast where we're counting down, or rather looking at the teams and their performance in the league thus far. I'm joined by LaShawn Dixon, football journalist and a football analyst, as well as football commentator Mr. Sylvester Charles. We looked at the first top two teams before we went on the break, which is St. Paul's and Garden Hotspurs. Now, the team in number 3, which we've spoken a bit about already, is a team that delivered the only defeat to the defending champions so far, and that is St. Peter's FC. They have 26 points in third place. Mr. Charles, we're going to start with you. You believe that this team is a team to look out for, and especially based on their performance against the defending champions, winning the first game and drawing the second. Your thoughts on St. Peter's?
St. Peter's, to my mind, is a very well-organized team. I think they have a very good coach, Anthony Netz, coming out of the Newtown area and being a coach for Newtown. So he has a vast amount of experience. He has been leading that team very well, coaching the team very well, and seeing it on the field of play with their brand of football. I can't get how they hurt Garden Hotspurs in the playoffs. And if you can hurt Garden Hotspurs like that in the last 8 minutes or so, defeating them so severely, I would think they have to be able to come back and win the game against one of the top teams. And so I've always respected the St. Peter's squad, the players that they have there. They have some senior players. They have the Harris brothers. You have Ed Nurse now. You have Deani Stevens, seem to be a threat to any team at all. And so they're going to constantly be reaping havoc. Premier Division. They have been in the Premier Division for some time. And so they can be considered one of our better teams because they have stayed up. I can't remember when they have been relegated. It has to be some time back. And so they have been there for some time, seasoned, a Premier Division team, well organized. And I think if they continue to listen to their coach, continue to prepare well, they're going to be a team to be reckoned with in the Premier Division.
All right, so Mr. Charles made the point that St. Peter's have been doing very well so far this season. It's actually one of the teams that could make some noise in the playoffs. But normally, as we know, LaShawn, St. Peter's tend to have a slow start, but they're doing exceptionally well so far. They're the only team to beat the defending champs. What is the reason for St. Peter's performing so well so far in the tournament, in the league?
Well, I think they're well coached, and then when you consider the fact that some of the signings they had this season, we had Aiden Nurse coming back home. There was Cannonier, Salas Cannonier, him coming back to the federation to play football. So they have a good core of players, and as I said, they're well coached. They have one of the most successful coaches in the Premier Division, Anthony Netz Isaac, who brings a wealth of experience and wealth of success he had with the Newtown team. So it's no surprise that they are able to perform the way they have been. And as you said, they're so starters, and if this is an indication, they have 2 games in hand on the likes of H.E. and Spurs, and they are only 3 points behind. So if they were to win those two games in hand, they will leapfrog H.E. and Spurs and jump up 3 points ahead of them, and be only 9 points ahead of the leading champions, the defending champion front, the Celeste St. Paul's. If you look at their goal scoring, their goals for and against, they scored 26 goals this season and have only conceded 7 in 12 games. So they're a solid team. They're one of the teams to look out for. For me, it's nice that they're in third. Last season we saw them. They were a bit consistent then, but I believe for season I expect that they could be one of the teams to challenge the defending champions. And as we already said, they've already taken points off them.
All right, well, that's a good look for St. Peter's, number 3 with 26 points, right? Yeah, 3 points behind Garden Hotspurs with 2 games in hand. So some exciting stuff. They're in a good position to continue the league. Well, let's look at the next team. They've already played 14 games, but they are below. They are they're tied on points with St. Peter's, but not having enough points after 14 games, and that's Flow 4GK and Rockets. Now, this is a team that are perennial title contenders. They always seem to be up there in the running for the playoffs and in the running for title, but they just seem to be getting unstuck in certain places. Like they get to a certain stage, and then they're stuck there. And this season, some fans did not take lightly to some of our commentators saying that a curse was on Keon, and that they don't seem to get past that curse. I would like to get your views on that, LaShawn, and then we'll go to Mr. Charles. Keon, for example, I'm going to give you a good example. They played St. Paul's back to back. They actually played 3 games back to back. They had a FA Cup quarterfinal, they had league, and then right after that FA Cup quarterfinal was another league game the following week. And all 3 games they lost. 3, 2, and 1-0, respectively. What's it with Keon?
Well, as you said, the 3 games against St. Paul's, that would have been a difficult patch for them to concede 6 goals across those 3 games and not scoring 1. But it was just a slight blip for me for a season for them where they probably overachieved. Consider the fact that this Vince Nelson, who was second in the Golden Boot race, with about 30 goals last season, and to lose that and to remain competitive, you have to give kudos to them. They had some moments this season. At one point they were in second. They were the closest just out of St. Paul's, but eventually they went on the bad run where they played St. Paul's 3 times in a row, twice in the league. To finish just as the league was suspended, they had a 0-0 draw with HE Garnett Spurs, and they experienced some player personnel changes where we saw the likes of Champagne, but they also welcome the likes of Carlos Berti, who should be able to address some of the goal scoring woes that was left by Vince Nelson. Bertie, we know, is one of the top strikers in the Premier Division over the last 3 years. Although he hasn't been in the best of form recently, we know what he can bring, and he has already shown glimpses of that since joining Keon. And if he can go on to be the Carlos Berti that was at Keon previously and then went to Newtown and even went to Village, if he can go on to show shades of that version of himself, it could be a massive coup for Keon having him in their side.
Mr. Charles, when you spoke about Spurs, you spoke about the mental state of players and the teams in the Premier League. Is Keon one of those teams that suffer from a mental block when it comes to they're this close, but yet just can't seem to get over the hurdle? And we've seen it last playoff and then the playoffs last season.
Yes, I think that is happening to most of our teams, with the exception of St. Paul's. They seem to have everything together: the mental, psychological, and the physical aspect of the game. They seem to be very good students. Keon has been a very slow start of the season. They're missing a few of their players. I agree with LaShawn that it takes them some time to get their chemistry back together and to get this sort of a winning attitude.
Well, Keon is a big sporting community, so definitely I would, I think many fans, even neutral fans, would want to see Keon performing well. But one of the things that we should note, though, before we move on from Keon, is the fact that they have a lot of young players. There are a lot of young players coming through the ranks. Assistant coach Jazza Buchanan always talks glowingly about his young players and how they've come through the ranks, and some of them have actually stood up to the test of playing in the Premier League, and they have a very good youth system as well. So I think with that, the future may very well all go well for Keon, and hopefully it will start this season. All right, so go ahead, LaShawn, if you want to chime in on that.
Yes, Keon. Even in the starting lineup, you see some of the regular starters are very, very, very young teenage players still. So it's not something they can build on going forward. They're not yet the finished article, but being able to compete while still being very young is something that's very commendable to me for about this Keon team.
All right, so that's Keon FC in fourth place. The team that we least expected to be in number 5, Rams Village Superstars. They have 24 points. They still have 2 games in hand, but still, it's not a position you expect to see Village. Why is it that Village is this low in the season? Could it be the fact that they had a number of players who were in the national setup and had to travel for those World Cup qualifiers? Or was it just that, they came off to a very slow start this season? Mr. Charles, what are your thoughts?
Well, I believe Village, another good, well-organized team, a good structure in place in terms of management and coaches. They had to change coach. I think we now have a Mr. Liebert, Billy Liebert, who is in charge of the coaching. I think they have lost some players. The Hanley brothers, one went off to professional soccer, that's Tatter. The other brother, the senior brother, went down to Gordon Hotspurs. So they have lost some players, losing Bertie as well late the second round. I also think you had some injuries in the team. They were looking at much better start in the first round, but they had some injuries. Kimari Somersault himself, and later his brother, Travis Rogers, were injured. So that kind of lessened the potency of the team in the second round. Plus, as you said, a number of the players were on national duty. So that sort of broke the momentum of the team. I know Aja Lawrence himself was out due to injury. So they did not have their starting lists for most of them. There were 2 things. The coach were trying new things, formation, and that could have really prevented the team from being very successful thus far. But I believe when you get back a player like Kimari and Travis Rogers and Ajar, and the full team is back on the field of play, we're going to see some very exciting football. I like the guy Johnson. He seemed to be a very hard worker. They say he's the fastest off the ball. He works tremendously hard from end to end. Starwood and others coming. Believe we're going to challenge. Well, it's really superstars. Okay, always there in the competition. You can't deny them. Never leave them out. They're going to be inside there thick and foremost.
You can't count out Village at all. You're right about that. LaShawn, do you think that with all that Mr. Charles was outlined, the fact that you have injuries to the Rogers brothers, Somersault brothers, then you have injuries, you have some of the key players, a lot of key players that Mr. Charles listed as well, who have moved on to other things and to other clubs, that somehow Billy Liebert will find a way to harness the energy that's left and get these guys playing good football to at least get them to the playoffs and also get them a chance to win the title.
Yes, at the end of the day, as you said, Billy Liebert, him being the Rams Village Superstars coach this season for the first time, I think he's been the head coach. But he's someone who's been around village football for quite some time. When they last won the league with Pedro as the head coach, he was the assistant to Pedro. So he has some coaching experience, and we also what he did last year in the second round for Trafalgar, helping them to stay up in the Premier Division. So he's definitely a good coach. But as Mr. Charles said, when you add him being a new coach of the Rams Village Superstars team, taking over from Stephen Charles, who did it for 2 to 3 years before then, and then you add the injury factor, and then you add the factor of players going after the national team, it would always have been difficult for Rams Village Superstars. They haven't gotten any rhythm thus far in the season, although they've played and won some games and looked well in some games. It's just not the ideal start for them, but I think this is a team that could be very dangerous in the latter half of the season when the wins would carry more weight, because titles and trophies would be on the line.
Indeed. And I just want to make this point as we move on from this, from Village. We always talk about how South Stars is like the feeder club to Village. So not only do they lose players to Village, but they also lose coaches as well to Rams and the Superstars. So it's unfortunate for them. But we'll talk more about Soul Stars a little later on. We don't want to beat up on them. But let's move to the next club. Well, before we go to the next club, we'll take another quick break and we'll come right back. We're going to be talking about Connery FC in 6th place, going all the way down to the number 12th position as we recap the league thus far, the Sknfa Premier League, that is currently on pause due to the COVID-19 situation, but certainly looking forward to the restart when that time comes. We'll be right back. Elliot's Funeral Parlor is the first licensed embalmer in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have a friendly and professional staff. At Elliot's Funeral Parlor, we offer a wide range of packages from $6,500, homegoing service at chapel, locally made caskets, tailoring of outfit for deceased of your choice, wake, overnight with slideshow, funeral, death announcement, obituary, booklets, family pin-ons, memorial books, preparation of funeral arrangements, wreath, fresh and artificial. For further information, call 469-3298, 664-2007 or 660-0186. Elliot's Funeral Parlor in Gingerland, Nevis. Dedicated to those we serve.
When you need electronics or appliances, find just what you want quickly in one location. Yes, everything's under one roof. Only at Smart Electronics. We have tons of name brands, amazing service, and easy layaway plans. Summer is just around the corner, and we will save you the hassle of walking around town or going to St. Martin. We have everything you need right here in St. Kitts, so don't get confused and go different places. We are located at Port Zonte opposite the food court. Visit us today, or if you have any questions, you can call 466-4271. Smart Electronics, way to live a smart life. Terms and conditions apply.
Where will we go when the quarantine thing done and everybody touch?
An open interactive event can be described as
tremendous, effective,
on par with any conference around the world.
From exhibitions to trade shows, corporate events to product launches, from press events to political functions. We are the secret sauce behind events that make you go, wow. We've staged multiple world-class events in the Caribbean and developed the skill to deliver quality in every detail, whether the event is live or fully virtual, or maybe even somewhere in between. At Open Interactive, we got your events covered. Get your free quotation today at www.madebyopen.com.
Autoplus Car Wash, located on the College Street Gut, Bastyr, St. Kitts. Bring your car to Autoplus Car Wash to remove water stains, wiper marks. Get your doors, roof panel cleaned, seat floor mats, buffing, headlights, and engine wash. You get quality service at the best price at Autoplus Car Wash. They really care for your car. Call 765-5140 or visit them on the College Street Gut, Bastyr, St. Kitts. Autoplus Car Wash, where the service is number one.
Welcome back to this special edition of Football Weekly. We're discussing the Premier League, the Sknfa Premier League thus far, which we know is on pause due to the COVID-19 situation in the country. But we're going to be reviewing, nonetheless, all 12 teams in the league and how they've performed thus far. With me is LaShawn Dixon, journalist with the St. Kitts Nevis Observer and a football analyst in his own right, and Mr. Sylvester Charles, football commentator on the Premier League live broadcast. Gentlemen, we're now at number 6. The team in number 6, if the playoffs were called today, they would have just scraped through Salt Island Auto Supply's Connery FC. They've had a very topsy-turvy start, got a victory in their first game of the season, but then after that, it started to go downhill for a bit. They had a caretaker coach, which turns out to be their club president. Then they go back to getting a permanent coach so early in the season. So they had a coaching change, the only team with a coaching change that early in the season. LaShawn, it seems as if Connery has not found their footing since that very unfortunate incident in 2019. They haven't quite recovered from that, and it's just like one thing after the next. They had a very poor showing in the playoffs last season, finishing last out of the 6 teams. And to start the season the way they did, they're quite fortunate to be in the 6th position at this point.
Well, going back to last season, pre-COVID, they were one of the better teams in the Premier Division. They were tied with Ramsville Superstars at one point, who were running away with the league. And then post-COVID, they turned out to be one of the worst teams in the Premier Division, and they struggled. They limped into the Super Six, where they, as you said, they finished 6th, and that form seemingly transferred into this season, where they didn't have the best of starts. They were coached by Azim Jenkins at the time. He eventually left. Then you saw the club president, Mr. Delwyn Delaney, taking over the reins for, I think it was 1 game. After they forfeited the game. They forfeited the game 1 week to St. Paul's, I think it was. The very next week, Delaney took over. They beat Sadler's 1-0. And then now we see Al Richards in charge. And since the coaching change, though they have looked better, the results still hasn't been consistent. I could remember them defeating Garden Hotspurs, a very confident victory. The last game before the pause, I think it was against Old Road, where it was a 1-1 draw. But we all know what this Connery team can do. They have been a team the last 10 years or so, one of the top teams in the Premier Division. They often come challenge for the Easter Cup, FA Cup, and even the Premier League Final Four, Super Six. But the last year and a half or so, they have they have found it very difficult maintaining consistency.
Connery's coach, the caretaker coach, Delwyn Delaney, would have said after he took over the team, when previous week they would have forfeited the game against St. Paul's, he took over, they got a victory against Sadler's. His comment was, Jesus came in the midst of the storm. So Connery has always been a team in turmoil. But how do you think they would have fared so far with the coaching change and with Al and the philosophy that Al Richards is trying to impart with them?
Well, Al has actually made a difference. You can see the difference with the play change. Looked a lot more organized on the field of play, a lot more purposeful. They were playing more together as a team. One over. Still have a long way to go. They seem to be a team that have a lot of challenges in terms of management and that kind of thing, players' attitude, etc. So they still have quite a work on. But it's a good thing that they would have made the changes and gone through what they had to go through to be on the other end now, looking as though they can create some problems. They're in 6th position. They're not too far away. We are into the round of play. And I believe if they continue with a forward thinking, being positive and actually working along with the coach and giving the coach what he actually wants, they can create some problems with rises because they're a very aggressive team, a team that like to work hard. You can see the effort, the muscle being put into it. They just have to listen a little more and be more patient, okay? And they can be still a good team in the Premier Division. But I'm happy that they're only in 6th place. They could have been out of the competition for a while. We were wondering if they can continue. They had so many issues. We were not hearing very good things about in terms of the management of the team, etc., etc. So we are happy that they are still there and they're working in the best interest of themselves and their community. So looking forward for better things. They have a time to relax and to think about it again. And probably this period of time, they would reorganize themselves and come with a different attitude.
Well, LaShawn made the point that last season they were doing very well before the COVID lockdowns, and after the COVID lockdown, they became the worst team. So maybe they may, hopefully for them at least, there will be a reverse this time around, that after the COVID lockdown, they will be a much better team than they were prior to the lockdown. but they're in sixth place with 21 points, and they've also played 14 matches, so they don't really have much game in hand, and a -3 goal difference. So certainly they will have to score more goals if they're looking to make the playoffs. Yep. All right, the team that is probably the most exciting team this season outside of St. Paul's is definitely MFCR United Old Road Jets. Now, the Old Road Jets, a team a couple of seasons ago almost got relegated, would have gotten relegated had it not been for the impasse and the fact that the season was abandoned. Then you fast forward to last season where they almost made the playoffs. They were just like this close to making the playoffs. Came on to the last game of the season. And now they're making some noise. They've started the season making some noise, beating some big teams and putting some bigger teams to the sword. What is it about this Old Road team that is exciting? Now, granted, they're in 7th position, so the heights of their performance fell off a bit. Well, it fell off a lot, actually, because they were in the top 3 and now they've fallen down to number 7. But nonetheless, it doesn't take away from their performance to start the season. Mr. Charles, what's exciting? Why is Old Road such an exciting team to watch?
Well, Old Road, in my view, has a very good coach. A tried and tested course with the Connery team for some brought tremendous success to the Connery camp, and has now moved to the Old Road area and working with the high school down there. A number of the players are coming up the high school setup where he is actually the phys ed and sports. And so he meeting these young, exciting players. You have a player, the Tiquan Williams. You recognize these players, you know, you have the Premier Division teams like Gone Hotspurs, Village Superstars, Newtown team, but the teams like to come up to prove a point. We are as good as the players from the city, from the Bastille area. And it's a sort of attitude that they have a point to prove. And so whenever they are coming up against so-called quote-unquote bigger teams, they come to show off their skill. And they are very fit. It's like they have preparation. They've been in the gym, they've been working hard, running well, and so on, preparing themselves well. And so what we have seen manifesting itself on the field of play is some youngsters who have a point to prove in the Premier Division. They want to show that it's not by any luck or chance, that they're really good players, and they're going to be here for a very long time.
Now, Sean, let me ask you to talk a bit more about Tiquani Williams, because yes, he's certainly the most exciting player we've seen this season. He is the leading goal scorer, surprisingly, so far in the season. Yep. And he also got a stint in the national team, which, in my opinion, he had a good run. He should have scored a goal against El Salvador in St. Kitts when that game was played. He had a beautiful chance, a nice pass from Kiefer Freeman, and only for him to tap it into the back of the net. He skied it over the bar. Imagine if he had scored that, his ratings would have gone up 10 notches. But definitely, he's a young man. He has a bright future ahead of him. But one of the interviews, post-match interviews we've had with Coach Morris, and he was asked about Tiquani Williams, and he actually said Tiquani wants to win the Golden Boot this season and has been training hard, spending extra time in the gym, spending more time on the pitch, more time than the other players, because he wants to win this award. Talk to us about what that just knowing that about Tiquani Williams and what we can expect from this young man.
Well, thus far this season, he definitely shows that he has been working hard. As you said, he's the leading goal scorer in the competition, and in a league where Keith Freeman has been running rampant. That's an achievement in itself, to be the leading goal scorer at this current point in time. But what we've seen from him thus far this season, sometimes literally willing Old Road on his own in some games, but he plays a big role. He's very dynamic the way he plays. He's very light on his feet. He's quick. Although he doesn't have great size, he still uses his miniature frame to his advantage and gets around bigger players. But he is definitely a footballer for the future, for St. Kitts and Nevis. And he's a player that we should relish every opportunity we get to see him, because if he can continue on this upward trend, I don't think he will remain a Premier Division player here for very long. I think professional scouts would be taking a look at him and probably taking him along with them one of these days.
The beautiful thing about Old Road as well is that in the midst of the season they got a new sponsor, MFCR, which is actually two entities coming together from the Old Road area, well, one of them at least from the Old Road area, and combining their resources to support the Old Road team. So they're looking a lot fresher with a new logo and new jerseys and all that kind of stuff. So they really are a team for the future. We can no longer think of Old Road as a team that gets promoted and gets relegated. But I want to get your thoughts quickly on this. Al Edwards, who could have joined us and could not have been able to join us on this broadcast, believes that Old Road should actually merge the two teams in that area, which the other one being Challengers team, and have the players from both teams playing in the squad, which would give Old Road more depth and possibly a chance to win the Premier League title. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I for one was in agreement with Al that if you combine the two teams and you get one strong team, it can benefit the community on a whole, but you would also probably step on a few toes for a few players who wouldn't want to give up, probably, let's say, a starting spot or give up their minutes to another player. But I do agree with Al. The strength in depth, the strength in numbers is always something that would be key for any team in the Premier Division. As you always know, injuries would always come up, suspensions would always come up, and for this young Old Road team, any benefit, any advantage they can get from anywhere, I think it should be grasped with both hands and chest.
So LaShawn raised a very good point about combining the teams. He's saying basically, look, you might have to step on some toes with some players who would normally be in the limelight for Challengers, will now may have to take a back seat, be on the bench, or probably not even be in the squad. How do you think it's viable for something like that to work, to combine the two community teams?
I wouldn't promote that. The more players you get exposed to football, the better it is for all the communities. I think the communities should ride on their own heels and not wait for somebody else to prop them up. The players have to develop on their own. They have a very good coach. If they continue, it may not be this year, it may not be next year, but in 3 years' time, if they continue on this upward trajectory with the proper coaching and management behind them, I believe that they can eventually succeed. I would not support the teams joining together. Challengers will have to work their own thing out, get their management together and their structure together, and try to work equally as hard as what the Olo Jets, what they're doing at this time. Okay, they have to go through the budding period, okay, to make something of themselves. When you actually get to the top, you'll know why you got there and what work you had to put in to get there. So you respect it and appreciate it more than if you were buttressed by some other players. And then you're not exposing as many players to football as you would like. Yeah. And so I wouldn't support that at all. The idea right now is to have as many players as possible exposed. These are young teams. They have a long way to go.
And we've seen it happen with other teams too. I mean, Sadlers was once SPD, was Sadlers Parsons DAB. And we've seen now where it's just basically Sadlers. So it's probably good to have the. I agree with you. I think the teams, granted, you have small communities and you have small teams, and they struggle with having enough players in your squad. But at the same time, I also believe that each team wants to stamp their own identity for their community and also in the competition. And if Old Road can do it, I think other teams can do it as well. All right, so we before we go on another break, we just mentioned their name, Fastcast Saddlers United. We want to talk about them. They too, like Old Road, had a nice start to the season. They've also picked up some really good players from other teams, and including from Mantab, and they certainly look like, yes, this is Saddlers' year. We've been talking about Saddlers now for the last 3 years as a team that will make the playoffs and will make some noise and to put some teams to the sword. But they haven't quite lived up to that this season so far. They too also had a coaching change early, just before the start of the season. it just hasn't worked out yet for Sadlers.
Well, Sadler's had a pretty good start. I was actually very excited about the prospects of the Sadler's team in the early stages. They were going pretty well. I think the community was really feeling pumped up by their team. The players were in a good early showing. But something went wrong. We saw them pick up a few red cards as well. And once they started picking up red cards, you know that something went wrong in terms of the attitude. Okay, they lost their way somewhat, and they needed to regroup and come again. I think with this close down or lockdown, they have an opportunity to talk a lot about their game, because I don't think the coaches do enough of that. Maybe they do, and the players are not listening, but we are not seeing it out on the field of play. They need to talk a lot more amongst themselves in a group, talk about football, talk about what they hope to do, their plans on the pitch, etc. Not just go out there and kick football, but we want the teams now to begin to show that they have a strategy in the game, and they would have thought about it, and it's a plan they're working at. And I think we'll see better football coming out of the community. But they had some ridiculous red cards. Some of their key players, showing their attitude and their frustration on the field of play, earning themselves some red card, and that would have destroyed the chemistry of the team. So they'll have to pay more close attention to their mental preparation. I think a lot of attention is played to actually the skill level, playing the ball, shooting the ball, etc. But their mental preparation of this team is key to the success of any team in the competition.
And funny you should say that, because that's actually one of the areas that their coach Kenroy Nibbs identified as a challenge for them. I think this was the game against Keon where the game was evenly matched for most of the match, and then the red cards started coming out, and the game wasn't going in Sadler's favor. And then before you know it, I think they had 2 players, if I'm not mistaken, sent off in that particular game. So he spoke about that is a big challenge that they have to be mental, they have to stay in the game, they have to stay focused. But let me also ask this, LaShawn, in the transfer window, they also lost some players. They've lost some players to Connery and to other teams, even though they got Champagne from Keon, who hasn't quite worked out for them so far. He hasn't been in the same kind of form that he was in with Keon. How is that going to hurt their chances of making the playoffs? They had good players, you had some solid players. Yes, you got a good player, but he hasn't worked out so far.
This is like defeated the Old Road team that we've played all season. They've had some big results against Newtown and a few others. But as you said, the last 3 big players, in Tristan Hanley, Trevor Hanley, and Nick Van Phipps, who are stuff for them. But since they found back some form, I could recall a game against St. Peter's where they did quite well. The potential is still there, and all is not lost on the season. The position currently, the top 6, it is not impossible for them to get into the Super 6 playoffs, and we all know that's a target for them. They have a game in hand on Old Road and Connery, so it's still potential in this team, and they should be able to compete still. They have the likes of Kyrie Jarvis, who at one point in time was a leading goal scorer in the league. They also have the likes of Junique Eddie, who is the one of the main leaders, the talisman at the back. We have Carlos Powell in goal. There's also Evansville Barnes, who at one point in time played for the national team and has proven to be quality. In the last few games, he'll have to iron that out. But there's still some quality in this team, and this team could still be a team that could make good playoffs.
And let me just make, as you talk about Evans Roy Barnes, I must say this about him. 2 things about him: that one works in his favor as a great player, and another one is what is going to hinder him from being consistent. He is a master at the free kick. He has scored some brilliant goals from the free kick in dangerous positions from set piece. So it seems like, for me, unlike most of the other players, he seems like he practices free kicks, because he has scored some brilliant goals from good positions, good way out, as a free kick specialist. So I see him as that. But the other thing that I think is that, he's hot-tempered. He did earn a couple of red cards that cost his team eventually. And that is certainly one of the things that he will have to pay close attention to if Saddlers are going to look to progress to the next round. All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the final 4 teams in the competition, in the league. And would you believe it? Sknfa Newtown United happens to be one of those teams. We'll be right back.
Elliot's Funeral Parlor is the first licensed embalmer in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have a friendly and professional staff. At Elliot's Funeral Parlor, we offer a wide range of packages from $6,500, homegoing service at chapel, locally made caskets, tailoring of outfit for deceased of your choice, wake, overnight with slideshow, funeral, death announcement, obituary, booklets, family pin-ons, memorial books, preparation of funeral arrangements, wreath, fresh and artificial. For further information, call 469-3298, 664-2007, or 660-0186. Elliot's Funeral Parlor in Gingerland, Nevis. Dedicated to those we serve.
When you need electronics or appliances, find just what you want quickly in one location. Yes, everything's on the one roof. Only at Smart Electronics. We have tons of name brands, amazing service, and easy layaway plans. Summer is just around the corner, and we will save you the hassle of walking around town or going to St. Martin. We have everything you need right here in St. Kitts, so don't get confused and go different places. We are located at Port Zonte opposite the food court. Visit us today, or if you have any questions, you can call 466-4271. Smart Electronics, way to live a smart life. Terms and conditions apply.
Where will we go when the quarantine thing done and everybody touch?
An open interactive event can be described as
Tremendous, effective,
On par with any conference around the world.
from exhibitions to trade shows, corporate events to product launches, from press events to political functions. We are the secret sauce behind events that make you go, wow. We've staged multiple world-class events in the Caribbean and developed the skill to deliver quality in every detail, whether the event is live or fully virtual, or maybe even somewhere in between. At Open Interactive, we got your events covered. Get your free quotation today at www.madebyopen.com.
Auto Plus Car Wash, located on the College Street Gut, Bastyr, St. Kitts. Bring your car to Auto Plus Car Wash to remove water stains, wiper marks. Get your doors, roof panel cleaned, seat floor mats, buffing, headlights, and engine wash. You get quality service at the best price at Auto Plus Car Wash. They really care for your car. Call 765-5140 or visit them on the College Street Gut, Bastyr, St. Kitts. Auto Plus Car Wash, where the service is number one.
So we're in the final segment of this special edition of Football Weekly. I'm Andre here. We were looking at the teams in the Sknfa Premier League and how they performed so far while the league is on break. I'm joined by LaShawn Dixon of the St. Kitts Nevis Observer and Mr. Sylvester Charles, who is a football commentator with us at the Sknfa Premier League live broadcast. Mr. Charles, we're going to start with you as we look at this other team that certainly has been a powerhouse, has been a legendary team. They're like the team for the Sknfa Premier League. But of late, of the last few years, they have certainly not had a good run of form. In fact, they have been in rebuilding state since 2012 when they last won the title, and they have not gotten close to it ever since. We're talking about Sknfa Newtown United. They've also had, I think, 2 coaching changes, I think, this season, where they had Earl Jones from last season. He had stepped away, gave it to Tyrone Sadler, but now Jones is back again, coaching the Newtown team. What are your thoughts about Newtown and the struggles they've been having this season and over the years?
Well, Newtown team has struggled in recent past. They have been one of the Premier Division teams that you look forward to every year. Their brand of football, they have their crowd always massing them and them pretty well. They have had very good coaches, but ever so often we have seen changes in management and changes in coaches, players being transferred. They have a pretty young team this year that they're trying to groom for the future. Young, exciting players, very skillful. Johannes Mitchum is one of those players. You have Lawrence, who came back from St. Paul's. But I think it's going to take a lot to hold these players together, and somebody's going to have to really manage them because they're young. They want a lot out of this game. They're expected to do a lot because Newtown is a football community. Coming out to the primary school, they're going up to high school. You have always heard about Newtown. Without Newtown in the playoffs, you don't feel like you're having a playoffs. And so they have been sadly missed over the years. And I think there are a lot going on in the background that is defeating them. So it's like Newtown defeating itself, okay, from inwardly. And they'll have to work on that, the management and so on, the whole clan of Newtown in terms of pulling themselves together and go back to playing football the way they used to play football and get the support of the community behind them. I think that is where they are suffering most. So at the moment, they have a young team they have to groom and they have to work very hard on the pitch and in their campaign. They're going to have a level head and so on. When they get their chances, make sure they score. But I don't think for this year, their fans will be expecting them to actually get into the playoff. If they get there, they'll be very fortunate to get there. Right now, they're all the way down the ladder. I don't think they'll actually be able to get there. But at this stage, they'll be hoping to stay up in the Premier Division and hoping for better things next year. But they're going to have to organize themselves internally as a club and then come with that power and that strength behind them.
14 points in the number 9th position. They are 10 points at least, or close to 10 points away from the number 6th position. And they don't have any games in hand, so it's going to be a really uphill task for Newtown. But let's look at the next team, Bath United, Hot Springs Bath United. Their second time in the Premier League. They've been here a few years before, and they were immediately sent back, almost immediately sent back to Division 1 football. But one of the remarkable stories about Bath is that they've built this squad with young players. So they took young players from some years ago, from since 2017 when they were relegated, and they built this squad to get them back into. So it's one of the youngest teams in the Premier League. And surprise, surprise, they're not at the bottom of the table. They have 7 points after 13 games, so they have a game in hand. They're tied with Diep Bay, which is just below them, just ahead on goal difference. And they're just 3 points ahead of Trafalgar South Stars. So they're not quite out of the danger zone. But if there's any team you expect to stay up, you probably put your money on Bath United. Mr. Charles, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I like this Bath team. I think Alex Claxton, the coach, he has been with this team for quite a number of seasons. He's from Nevis, born and bred, and he believes in his football and his players. I think we have seen a new brand of football coming out of the Bath's club. They have been playing quite well, and they have had some good performances, not really losing by quite a lot. Good showing in many of their games, especially in the first. They have a few players that came in from, I think there's a Jamaican now and a player from St. Vincent who has helped to buttress the team. And in one game I saw there, I can't remember who they were playing against, but these players were quite dynamic on the field of play, and they really were in with a chance to actually win. I think that game actually drew. And so I think that is one of our promising clubs. And I'm really hoping that they will continue to grow from strength to strength. They have the right attitude. They have to come to St. Kitts to play. It's unfortunate that we are not going over to Nevis so that they can play on their own turf at Grove Park or over at the backfield. But everything is virtual, so the fans over there can see exactly what their team has been doing in the Premier Division strip. But I think they have quality players. They have been listening to their coach. They'll have to listen a bit more. The standard has actually improved over the years, and it's a team that I see can grow from strength to strength. So I hope that they continue in the same vein and come back out when we resume and show us exactly what they would have had.
Well, it's interesting you should point out the fans in Nevis and the fact that they are able to see the games virtually, though not being able to be there live, at Grove Park in Charlestown. But there is a fan. Bath has a very high-profile fan from the UK who watches the broadcast every single week. He never misses a Bath game. He's always on the broadcast on Facebook Live. So I want to tip my hat off to Stephen Duggett over there in Norwich, the UK. A big Bath fan, I tell you. He never misses a game.
Yes.
LaShawn, Bath United, you and I, we commentated the game, the Division 1 finals last season that Bath won when they defeated DFB. I think it was 3-0 in that game. And certainly we were saying that we were looking forward to seeing Bath in the Premier League because we felt that they will come with a very good defensive performance as they did in that Division 1 finals. And we could say to some extent we've seen that they've conceded as the lower ranked teams. They're the team that conceded the least goals, and that is the reason why they're out of the danger zone right now in the Premier League.
Yes, we spoke about their defensive discipline in that Division 1 final. Work on and try up when me and I'll come in one of the games earlier this season. We spoke of them being up front, trying to play Mayors, quality we have in the Premier League, and the quality in coaching and the quality in players.
All right, so we're down to the final two teams. The two teams at the bottom of the table that if the league ended today, they would be relegated. TGE DFB Eagles and Trafalgar South Stars. Now, South Stars narrowly escaped relegation last season. They managed to stay up on the very last game of the season. But before we talk about them, because they're at the bottom right now, let's talk about DFB. LaShawn, will turn over to you quickly. DFB, this is their second stint in the Premier League. The last time around, they were embarrassed. They got, goals were just scored upon them in abundance. This time around, it doesn't seem that bad. In fact, they managed to hold out a St. Paul's team for most of the game before they lost the game. They did the same to Saddlers. In fact, they imposed themselves on Saddlers and scored goals, just not enough to win the game. They have a minus 42 goal difference, which is still the highest goal difference, conceding 55 goals. So they've conceded more goals than any other team in the Premier League. Still not as bad as the last time they were in the league, but still bad. But what are your thoughts? Do you think the DFB can survive relegation?
But they'll have to be more disciplined defensively. Is where it will be the difference. Their goal difference could prove big, and their goal difference to and Bath United's advantage 19 and goal difference at minus 20. So it's not doom and gloom yet for the Eagles. When the season restarts, true defensive discipline should be first on their list.
Well, Mr. Charles, the final team in the table, at the bottom of the table, Trafalgar South Stars, a team that you would think, with newcomers like DFB and Bath, that South Stars would be on top of those two teams. But instead, they're at the bottom with 4 points. They're 3 points less than what Bath and DFB has. And by the way, Bath has a game in hand, so they're in pole position. South Stars, what's wrong with them? And they've too conceded the second most goals behind DFB, 43 goals.
Well, South Stars has always been considered players from the players who can't actually make the Village Superstars team. They stay down in South Stars. But I know coming out of the Trafalgar area, these are very proud players who probably don't even want to play for really superstars. I think they suffer from an organizational problem, management problem. They seesaw up and down from the Premier Division. That has been it. They come up one year, they go back down, they go up and they go back down. They're not really being able to stabilize, and I think that is founded in the structure and the management of the team. You know, they don't have a wholesome structure to take the team forward and stabilize it in the Premier Division. It's just more than kicking the ball on the field of play. They have to come in with a plan. And I think psychologically, they're not really ready for the Premier Division. They're bullies from the first division, yes. They play very well down in the first division. That is their level. But when it comes up to the Premier Division, where they meet more seasoned team and more organized team with structures behind them and good management structure, they suffer from that sort of organization. And you see coming out on the field of play, where the players are not playing 90 minutes. They give you a good, maybe 45 minutes, a good first half. After that is downhill. And so teams normally run all over them in the second half and do as they please on the field of play. They need to practice harder. They need to organize themselves, listen to their coaches. It is what you do off the field of play that shows when you come onto the field. It's the same thing can be said about Date Bay. If I may make a quick comment about Date Bay, they have struggled because I understood after doing some investigation that a number of the players do not like to attend practices. So they have lost the game off the field of play even before they get onto the field. And so they are just showing up for matches as against planning and practicing and strategizing off the field. So when they get there, they're a little more organized. And so a lot of these lesser teams in terms of their management structure are going to suffer in the Premier Division if they don't have that sort of structure behind them. Trafalgar has been one of those teams. And so they'll need to work on their organization and put that together. And I think with a proper structure behind them and management system, we can see better work coming in from the players from Trafalgar South Stars.
Good points there. And actually, I was going to ask you to comment on DAB as well. So thank you for at least injecting that. Well, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. We're looking forward to the league returning. And when that happens, that we will be able to see football action once again. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being on today's program. And we, like I said, we are looking forward to being back in the stadium to give you the commentary live from the Warner Park and to see the teams battle it out, because we want to see this playoff, because this playoff is not going to be a normal playoff. It's going to be a very exciting one. If last season was anything to go by, the Super 6 is certainly a very good invention from the Sknfa.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
We have the fans back as well.
Yes, and we do certainly by that time. We certainly hope to have the fans back in the stadium. Well, that will do it for this broadcast. I want to thank LaShawn Dixon from the St. Kitts News Observer and Mr. Sylvester Charles, football commentator. And thank you, the viewers, for watching and being a part of this show. Have a great day.